after Nick Saban retires. Alabama loses 5-star Caleb Downs, 5-star offensive tackle Kadyn Proctor. Proctor says he's going to Iowa. He's at the basketball game talking about, all this, great positivity that he's received from his old friends. And now we get news this week. Kadyn Proctor will be leaving the program. Kirk Ferentz said, we wish him well. And all reports are indicating Proctor's headed back to Alabama. Andrew, what does this say? First of all, what does this say about Alabama? And then, like, in general, is this as big a surprise to you as it was to me?
Yeah, it's a bombshell, right? I mean, that's the term. And I think this is the one that's going to open up eyes for a lot of people, hopefully. I'm all for, player movement, player empowerment, all that stuff. But what if you're Iowa and the day before spring practices, a franchise prototypical left tackle's like, hey, I'm out. So let's kind of relate this to like an NFL franchise. You sign this big free agent, window closes, and then the day before practice, he says, I'm just leaving. Iowa, probably more than, 70% of the programs around the country is equipped to maybe handle a left tackle walking outside the door. But this would be backbreaking for, your favorite school out there, because how are you going to adjust? And I know there's going to be another transfer portal window. You can go and get another offensive tackle. But I was going through this morning our offensive tackle rankings from the 2023 transfer cycle. Yeah, the top 4 guys, like they all played over 800 snaps at tackle. But behind that, it was a bunch of guys that played guard or were injured or never panned out. I mean, it's a premium position. So to me, like, my reaction is kind of, what are we doing? There's no real guardrails in place. And I think it's easy. Yeah, I mean, let the players do what they want to do. But I mean, if you're an Iowa staffer this morning, I think you're waking up and wondering, what am I doing here in terms of roster management and trying to build a program? And I think the other thing, if you're, contribute to the Iowa collective, are you waking up this morning and going, why am I doing this at this point? So that's kind of my reaction just on the Kadyn Proctor news.
So you can leave home again.
Love it. Couple things I think this says. One, I think Bama's collective is getting their money right, which is something that we had said they needed to do. Because, Saban wasn't, like, raising money for the collective wasn't really high on Saban's list of things to do. I think that's one of the reasons he was frustrated. We talked about fewer kids being willing to take the Bama discount. So looks like Bama can pay full freight now. Now, apparently Iowa's collective, I'm reading this from the chat, but it's from a guy I know is an Iowa fan, and he's in our chat a lot. Their CEO stated Proctor got nothing from the fan portion of the collective and very little from the corporate side. His contract will be void with the collective. So maybe Iowa structured this thing with this possibility in mind. I think this is actually good for the sport. Not that it's a long-term thing, but I think the absurdity of the move, right, that we're having guys bounce to multiple schools within the same semester, does speed up the process of where we probably need to get. And ultimately, it's going to just be a choice the schools have to make. Do we want to keep all the money for ourselves, or do we want to exert some level of control over the player? I think we're going to have more stories like this, and I think it's going to really suck in the short term. But I think long term, they actually probably need things to point to in Congress. Like, look at this. Like, this is really bad for academics. And it probably is, actually, for you to be at multiple schools in the same semester repeatedly. But having these nice newsworthy items really does sort of help, I think, the schools ultimately reach where they probably need to get. But that's not the transfer I think we were going to talk about. Did you guys see that Troy Dannon left Washington for Nebraska as the athletic director after only 5 months? Like, we're all thinking about Kadyn Proctor leaving. I get it. But, like, Troy Dannon leaving Washington is going to cause people to get fired and lose their jobs because the new guy is going to want to bring in his own people. Like, that's a much bigger deal to me. Just these guys bouncing like crazy, and we're going to make a big deal out of the player leaving because he's a far sexier name. But, like, administrators and coaches do this stuff all the time. So it's a little bit hypocritical of us to say that that's bad for the sport. I think they're kind of both bad for the health of the sport. I don't think this portal stuff is actually good.
First of all, Troy Dannon just wanted a day off. He got to Washington 5 months ago. They reached the title game. His coach leaves. He has to hire a new football coach. He fires his basketball coach. And then before he hires the replacement, he's leaving for Nebraska. That man was like, this was a long-ass 5 months. I'm going to go to Lincoln and chill out for a few weeks. Basketball and football are set for at least 2 more years.
There's a buyout involved there, though, right? I mean, that's kind of goes to the need of why we need this for the player side. So at least if this does happen, the school gets something in return there. I am very disappointed in you guys, just assuming that this is about the money, because he did go with his buddies on spring break. I mean, from Alabama, like he reunited with them. What if he's all in on a championship and it's not about the money? I kid, because we all know that is not absolutely what is happening here whatsoever. No, I'm with Bud. I'm with Andy. I think this could potentially be that this is what makes Congress, makes whoever needs to wake up and say, all right, here we are. I mean, it's not that it's why it's right in your face because he did shift schools. Because, if you talk to Pat Narduzzi about Jordan Addison when he had won the Biletnikoff, they had a deal in place for him that was an NIL deal that they thought was going to be good enough, and he was all back and it was gung-ho, and then he leaves for USC, and we know how that played out. Narduzzi was pissed. But it was kind of like it didn't feel as bad because he didn't leave and then come back. This one is so glaringly in your face of how serious of a problem this is and how impossible it is to regulate and create a roster. I mean, that's where the coaches are frustrated because, you are trying to structure things. We're talking about the importance of the general manager position and having guys and, getting the best roster, but also in your younger players, having them staggered so you can have a starter come in. It's impossible. Like, good luck. And yeah, they'll probably be able to replace them. But what if they had somebody who was really good? Maybe it was a 4-star or somebody else that they were going to sign pre-spring to get practice starts today. Like, they are losing that off somebody, because they're losing a player that was starting caliber and a stud in Proctor. So I think it's absolutely it's a problem that I think is going to come to the forefront because of cases like this. There's also, this is going to open up a lot of people's eyes that are potentially going to say, man, if they did it, why can't we?
Do you remember like when you were in college and your friend broke up with a girl he'd been dating for a while that you didn't like, but even though they broke up, you didn't want to say anything about it just in case they got back together? Mm-hmm. I want to know how Alabama fans are responding to this news, because the first thing I thought of yesterday when this broke, besides the shock of it coming through, the first thing I thought of was the one Alabama fan. He was one of many who were just talking about how Proctor wasn't that good anyway. They didn't need him. They were coping. But there was the one guy who told me that it was fine because Kadyn Proctor was a system left tackle and he wouldn't work in Kalen DeBoer and Ryan Grubb's system. Left tackle. Now, I just need to know, is that like, did they change the system to make Kadyn Proctor fit again? Or how are we feeling, Alabama fans? Were we just kidding? We loved you all along, Kadyn. Ha, ha, ha.
If your system
I want to know.
Yeah.
I want to know on the spring break trip, this reunion tour, was Caleb Downs there too? I mean, because that, like, if you want to really blow up the college football world, imagine him. Because, I mean, Iowa's one thing, and I don't think people feel, and it's an offensive lineman. Like, I don't think people are that upset about it. But if you threw in Ohio State in the mix and he went back, or Quinshot Judkins went back to Ole Miss, oh my goodness. If you want to see just like World War III on a level in college football like we've never seen before, if either of those two return to their schools in a similar fashion, oh my goodness.
We've seen this. I think we're going to keep seeing this, by the way. Like,
yeah.
I mean, DJ Lundy, he's not a good player, but like, he's okay. Like, he went from Florida State to Colorado and bounced back after 4 weeks. Mm-hmm. So I think we're going to see a lot more of this in the spring window.
Well, look, this is happening to try and tie the boring topics with the ball topics that we can talk about in terms of these players and depth charts and roster management. It is because the judge ruled right now that multiple transfers are fair game. Mm-hmm. Like, we are in this no man's land when it comes to eligibility. NCAA is fighting against the multiple transfer case. They're fighting against the back pay of NIL case and about whether you can be, an enforcement on any kind of NIL inducements. And in the multiple transfers case, the judge is ruling that they can't enforce any of these multiple transfer rules that opens the door, as long as you can make it work with admissions, right? And I guess you can always make it work with admissions. Yep, this is how we're going to be seeing this. And so are we just going to run with, you talk about guardrails, Andrew, is like, are we just going to run like this until we get to employment?
Well, I mean, I think if you look at, okay, what are the long-term effects? I think you're only going to see more coaches leaving for the NFL. I think we're getting closer to the NFL model in college football. Like, I think we are getting as close as we can. High school recruiting is your NFL draft. Transfer portal is your free agency. But when NFL franchises lose someone like a Kadyn Proctor, they're getting a compensatory pick. I was getting nothing out of this. And Kadyn Proctor is a kid that has visited that school over 24 times. He's been committed to them twice. I saw a tweet yesterday. I wish I had pulled up. It was from some fan. It was Kadyn Proctor's career at Iowa. 2 commitments, 2 decommitments, 0 practices, 0 games, 1 NCAA violation. It's like, I think there's a lot of people in college football working in those buildings that are going to be fed up unless there is some type of just establish some rules here and make it so this isn't a 365, 24 hours a day type of transactional, management when it comes to the rosters.
And I think a lot of them would give up some money in order for that trade-off too. Like that's really kind of the choice, right? Because like they make what they make because the players aren't paid. Trev Alberts yesterday in his opening press conference said that he expects the payroll for college football teams to immediately be $20 million. Right. And that's something like they got to be planning for. So, but I think a lot of the guys that, I mean, Ivan's, I'm sure it's the same way. Like they're like, yeah, I would take a little bit less to have like some more defined days off.
Quality of life.
Yeah, exactly. We talked about how a lot of these guys, they say they want to go to the NFL, but they can't because then their wife would have to go back to work. Right. Or like if they're making, 800 living in kind of a more rural spot, you can't go to the Rams for 250. Because then it's just a totally different quality of life living in a city with a crazy, cost of living. But I think as far as staying in college, they would take some pay cut in order just to achieve some quality of life.